On December 21st of 2023, Blue Scooty became the first person to play out a game of NES Tetris so far that the game crashed. He played all the way up until level 157, until he hit a barrier in the game's ancient code that prevented him from progressing any further. But is it possible to go further from here? And if so, can we get all the way to level 255, the last level in the game? And if we can, what comes after that? All of those questions and more will be answered in this video, but first, we need to start back at the beginning of the game's history in order to figure out how to beat the crash. Tetris was released in 1989 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's a simple game with a simple goal: place pieces, which fall from the top of the screen, into complete rows in order to clear out lines of the board. For every 10 lines you clear, the level increases and the pieces fall slightly faster. The game's fastest speed is reached at level 29, where the pieces fall a row every single frame, and at this level, the game can't move pieces to the sides fast enough if you hold down the directional buttons. They'll always land slightly short of the full side. For this reason, level 29 was considered the kill screen because this level would always kill your run. However, level 29 isn't really a kill screen in the traditional sense. A kill screen is usually a glitch in the game's code that makes it impossible to progress further, like the 22nd stage of Donkey Kong where the timer is 4 seconds long, or the 256th level of Pac-Man where half of the board is corrupted, making it impossible to progress further. But NES Tetris doesn't have any game-breaking glitches at level 29. The only problem is that holding down the buttons can't get pieces to the sides anymore. Level 29 is clearable if you could somehow get the pieces to the side faster. And over the years, multiple players would develop techniques to do just that. The first player to survive past level 29 was Thor Ackerlund, reaching level 30 in 2011. He did this by using a technique known as hyper-tapping, where he vibrated his thumb over the D-pad in order to press it faster than the game's built-in auto-shifter could. 7 years later in 2018, a teenage player named Joseph Saley used hyper-tapping to reach level 31, kicking off a revolution of new teenage hyper-tappers. And in 2021, one of these players, Cheese, would develop a new technique, rolling, where instead of pushing his finger into the button on top, he rolled his fingers on the back of the controller into a finger he had on top of the button. Using this technique, Cheese was able to achieve movement speeds much faster than any other technique and at the limit of what the game can physically process, giving him much more room to work with on level 29. The rolling playstyle turned out to be what we needed to make level 29 completely playable, and if you'd like to learn more about how we got here, I'll have a video about this linked in the description. But the speed of level 29 isn't the only thing preventing us from playing further. You may have noticed that in every screenshot I showed of a level past 29, the level number was either wrong or not a number. This is because the game developers didn't expect anyone to go past level 29, so the table of level values only goes from 0 to 29. Every value after that is just a random bit of game data. In Thor's case, level 30 is 00, and in Joseph's case, level 31 is 0A. And once we go further, even more elements of the game will start to break. NES Tetris has 10 unique color palettes for the pieces. Every 10 levels, these palettes are supposed to repeat, but it turns out that this seemingly simple behavior breaks down at level 138 due to a faulty calculation. If you want to learn more about this, Hydrant Dude has a great video on why exactly this happens. I'll put the link in the description below. The result of this behavior breaking down is that starting at level 138, the game pulls color palettes for the pieces from places it's not supposed to. These color palettes are known by the community as the glitched colors. In total, there are 118 glitched color levels. Well, actually 106, since levels 161 and 225 are just the level 1 palette, and levels 192 to 201 are actually just the 10 normal palettes. And out of these 106 levels, there are actually only 49 unique palettes, since there are a couple duplicates, and the colors repeat around halfway through the sequence. You might notice that some of these palettes are quite a bit darker than others. In total, out of the 49 unique glitched color palettes, there are 11 color palettes that I'd consider to be hard to see due to some dark block colors, and these palettes span 24 levels out of the 106 total levels of the glitched colors. These color palettes can be made brighter by adjusting the settings on your CRT, like I've shown here with level 146's palette, but some palettes are going to be hard to see no matter what, like level 148. But if we want to get to level 255, there is a much more significant barrier than the palettes. The NES is, at its core, a very old computer. The developers of NES Tetris had to carefully optimize their code in order to make sure that everything could be done in a reasonable time frame. So what do you think would happen if some part of the game took longer than ever expected, like for example, the scoring calculations? Well, as it turns out, if we take too long to do these calculations, there's a chance that the game will crash. Here's a small diagram which should show what normally happens every frame. HydrogenDude goes into more detail about this in a video he made, but the important thing to know is that if we take too long with these calculations, the timing of the forced end-of-frame graphics update happens in a part of code that it never normally would, and there's a chance the CPU won't be able to resume what it was doing properly. If this happens, the CPU starts running data from the beginning of the NES's RAM as code, which causes the CPU to crash. This glitch is the true kill screen of the game. The first opportunity to crash the game is at level 155, where the game will crash if you clear a single into this level. On January 2nd, 2024, Fractal161 became the first person to crash the game at this point. And as you go onwards through the levels, there are even more ways to crash the game, 102 in total. However, we can avoid these crash points by changing how long the score calculations take, and we can do this by changing what types of lines we clear. So if a single crashes the game, we can clear doubles instead, and if a double crashes the game, we can clear triples instead, so on and so forth. This raises the question, is it possible to avoid crashing the game and get all the way to level 255? Before we get started with this section, I want to say something. Rolling is not easy. Rolling is very hard. There's a lot of things you have to think about when rolling at level 29 speeds, which takes nearly all of your concentration, and most of the information that I'm about to present is subconscious to players now, and they'll now have to actively keep track of these elements if they want to avoid the crash. And only 3 players so far have even managed to get far enough to crash the game in the first place, and these 3 players are Blue Scooty, Fractal161, and Pixel Andy. With that out of the way, let's go over a few bits of essential knowledge. The types of line clears that can cause the game to crash depends on the level you're currently playing, or if applicable, the level that you're transitioning into. You can pause the video now for a full list of what types of line clears will crash the game at what levels. Most of these clears won't crash the game 100% of the time, but there's still usually a significant chance that I don't think any player would want to take. This brings us to our first way of avoiding the crash. Don't clear the types of lines that crash the game at that level. For example, on level 157, singles can crash the game, so the easiest way to avoid the crash on this level is to not clear singles and stick to doubles, triples, and Tetrises. But what if you absolutely have to take a single? Well, in this scenario, there are 3 more methods you can use to avoid a crash. Pushing down for 1 to 7 pushdown points, pushing down for over 7 pushdown points, and flashing the next box. The pushdown methods are pretty self-explanatory, although it is nearly impossible to get over 7 pushdown points on level 29. But flashing the next box is something that no one has ever had to do in a real game. Until now. It's not super well known, but pressing select on the controller will toggle the next box on or off. Whether or not the next box is active on the frame after a line clear changes the odds of whether or not the game will crash. So effectively, what a player has to do is turn off the next box while a piece is falling, wait for the line to clear, and turn it back on immediately when the next piece comes. And they have to do this while also focusing on rolling. It's doable, but it's definitely going to require the development of some new muscle memory. These 3 methods don't work for every type of line clear at every point, and sometimes these methods can even cause the game itself to crash, but I'm going to cover in detail which methods work and which ones don't at what points in a future video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see that. The important thing, however, is that for every possible type of line clear that can crash the game, doing at least one of these 3 techniques will prevent the game from crashing. However, there is something else we have to worry about: desyncs. It's guaranteed that at some point between levels 164 and 179, the game will skip a level up visually, and it will skip a line clear event visually. Let's talk about what I mean by both of those. When you level up in NES Tetris, the game will play a sound, increase the level counter, and change the palette to the next level's color. However, if you clear a single which would transition you to level 164 or higher, the game will play the level up sound, but it will not advance the level color or palette. At this point, you're playing level 164, but the game shows that you're playing level 163. By level 177, this will also happen for all 3 other types of line clears. Therefore, it's guaranteed that by the transition into 177, the game at some point will have switched to displaying the palette that should have been used for the previous level, and the palette and level counter will stay one level behind for the rest of the game. Unfortunately, this means that the blood red palette that has been shown in some other videos as belonging to level 255 is not actually shown for this level. It's actually this palette. But if you thought the game being behind on displaying your level was hard enough, there's arguably an even more confusing desync that can happen between the displayed line count and the internal line count. Starting at level 166, singles will stop immediately updating the displayed line count after they're cleared. This means that if you clear a single at, say, 1600 lines, the game will still display 1600 lines, even though your internal line count is 1601 at this point. And if you clear another single, the displayed count will update to 1601, even though the internal line count is 1602. At this point, the way to get the game back on track is to clear a different number of lines, which will get the displayed and internal line counts back in sync. By level 179, all three other types of line clears will stop updating the displayed line counter as well. However, the last level where line clears can crash the game is 173, so if you lose track of your line count, the only consequence is getting caught off guard by a color change. This could still be deadly, but not as deadly as potentially crashing the game. And on top of this, there's an interesting visual glitch that can happen as well, called confetti. Well, actually, it's two different visual glitches, which I'll refer to as limited confetti and infinite confetti. The earliest point limited confetti can be triggered is clearing a single into level 160, which causes the game to seemingly freeze. There are a couple of graphical glitches across the screen, but the most important one for us is this little character that's moving downwards. Once this touches the location of the next piece, the game will resume. The behavior of this glitch can be changed with certain button presses. By holding B, down, left, or right, we can make the game not resume until we release these buttons, and by pressing either A or select, we can make the game resume immediately. Now, let's move on to infinite confetti. The earliest point this glitch can be triggered is clearing a single into level 167, and this time the game isn't just frozen temporarily, it will be frozen forever, at least until we press any button. Both types of confetti can happen up until level 182, but covering every single point it can happen would take too much time. However, the last level where line clears can crash the game is 173, so a player may want to use infinite confetti on level 174 to take a break, before playing the remaining 81 levels. Doing some quick napkin math, if each level is 10 lines long, there are another 810 lines until level 255 from here. But unfortunately, this isn't the case, because one of the levels between 174 and 255 will be a staggering 810 lines long instead of the usual 10. This is because of a level up calculation that breaks down, and the point that it breaks down depends on what level you start at. If we start between levels 15 and 19, the 810 line level will occur at level 235. Now unfortunately, this specific level has this color palette, which is the second darkest out of all of the glitched colors, and we have to play this palette for 810 lines. But if we change the level that we start on, we can also change the level, and by extension color palette, that we have to spend 810 lines playing. If we start at level 14, the long level is 234, which has this palette. If we start at levels 13, 12, 11, or 10, the long levels are 223, 222, 221, and 220 respectively, which have these four palettes. And lastly, if we start between levels 0 and 9, the long level is 219. Personally, I like the palette of level 220 best, with 234 being a close second. But no matter what you think, I think we can all agree that any of these palettes are better than 235's. However, even if we keep level 235 as our long level, there is still one last challenge to overcome before we can get to level 255, and well, here it is. Starting at level 249, the simple act of placing a piece can crash the game. You heard that right. Placing a piece can crash the game. This simple fact makes these last few levels the hardest of them all. Even though we've already cleared over 3,200 lines, these last 60 lines are on a whole other level of difficulty. On level 249, placing a Z, O, S, L, or I piece has a 73% chance of crashing the game if you do nothing. If you wish to get past this level, you must either push down or flash the next box whenever you place 5 out of the 7 pieces. But fortunately, whenever you clear a line, the game is guaranteed to not crash, even if you don't push down or flash the next box. And this behavior, fortunately, also holds true for all levels past this point. Levels 250, 251, and 252 all have color palettes that are among the hardest to see of all of the glitched colors. Fortunately, placing pieces or clearing lines will not crash the game on any of these 3 levels. On level 253, if you place a Z, O, S, L, or I piece, there is a 10% chance of crashing the game. However, unlike level 249, flashing the next box will drastically increase these odds, so if you don't want to roll a D10, you must push down instead if you aren't clearing a line. If you can get past this level, there are only 2 left. Level 254 has a color palette that is completely made of dark blue. Pushing down or flashing the next box is nearly a guaranteed crash on this level, but if you play normally, this is easy to avoid. And now, we've reached the final level, 255. This level is known as the rebirth screen because of what happens if you can beat it. This level has a color palette that is almost completely dark purple, and for the next 10 lines, placing a Z, O, S, L, or I piece will crash the game 73% of the time. If you wish to avoid these odds, you must, once again, either push down or flash the next box whenever you place 5 out of the 7 pieces without clearing a line. But what happens if you're able to get past this level? After all, it's the final level in the game. Well, if you're able to get past it, along with the many other pitfalls along the way, this is what you'll see. The level loops back around to 0. Our long journey through areas of NES Tetris that weren't supposed to be seen or even exist has finally come to a close. We've come all the way back to where we began. There's absolutely nothing preventing you from playing further at this point, since the game has effectively been reborn at level 0. A natural question after we get to this point is, what's next? Well, I don't really know. In the beginning of 2024, which is when I'm writing this video, we don't know for sure if some of the crash avoidance techniques I covered in this video are actually human viable. But if someone ever does manage to get to level 255 and loop the game back around, I think we'll know what's next by then. Or at the very least, we'll have a better idea of what's next. Hey, before I end the video, I just want to say really quickly that this video would not have been possible without the amazing help of Hydrant Dude and other people in the ROM hacking channel of the CTM Discord. If you want to check out Hydrant Dude's stuff, it's all going to be in the description. Definitely check out the Crash Theory spreadsheet if you want to learn more about what specific points can crash the game. And one more thing before I go. Relative to a lot of other stuff in the NES Tetris community, most of this is pretty new information, so it's possible I might have made a mistake or there might have been some inaccuracy in the information I used. If I think it's significant enough to tell you guys, I'm going to put it in a pinned comment down below. And I think that's everything, yeah, so thanks for watching. Bye!